welcome to a deep dive into a truly mind-bending phenomenon. The placebo effect.
Yeah.
It's this counterintuitive idea that sometimes, like fake treatments, can produce very real results. We're going to be exploring this fascinating topic through the lens of a landmark paper published in 1955 by Henry Beecher called The Powerful Placebo.
I know that one.
Joining us is an expert who has spent years studying the placebo effect and Beecher's work. I can't wait to unpack all of this with you.
It's a pleasure to be here.
Okay, so
Beecher's paper.
Corruptorcy really shook things up in the medical world.
It did.
It's considered a classic because it forced doctors to start thinking differently about how our minds influence our bodies.
That's right.
So I've heard a story about Beecher's time as an army doctor in World War II that really illustrates this mind-body connection. Something about a soldier who needed surgery, but they were out of morphine.
Oh, yeah.
Saline solution?
Yes, it was a battlefield situation.
Wow.
Chaos, limited supplies.
Oh, wow.
Beecher needed to operate, but didn't have enough morphine to manage the soldier's pain.
Oh, my gosh.
So, thinking quickly, he injected the soldier with saline solution.
Wow.
Essentially salt water.
Really?
And incredibly, the soldier calmed down, allowing Beecher to perform the surgery.
Oh, my gosh.
That experience was a turning point for him, a glimpse into the power of the mind to influence physical experiences.
Wow, that's a powerful story. It makes you wonder just how much of what we feel is shaped by our thoughts and beliefs.
Yeah.
Was that experience the spark that led to Beecher's research on the placebo effect?
It definitely played a role. It's important to remember that Beecher was writing at a time when the field of medicine was undergoing a major transformation. Doctors were moving away from simply observing patients to developing more rigorous scientific methods for testing treatments. Randomized controlled trials where you compare a treatment to a placebo were becoming the gold standard.
So just to clarify for our listener, randomized controlled trials help determine if a treatment really works. Or if it's just the placebo effect creating the improvement.
Exactly. And that's precisely what Beecher was advocating for in his paper. He was pushing for this new way of thinking about medicine and had to convince a lot of skeptical doctors that the placebo effect was a real phenomenon, something they couldn't just ignore. He even used the term powerful placebo to really drive home the point that it was a significant factor that needed to be considered in any medical study.
It sounds like he was really a pioneer in the field.
He was.
I'm sensing a coming here. Were there any challenges to Beecher's work?
Of course, no groundbreaking idea comes without critics. There were some who questioned Beecher's statistical analysis. Even one of his colleagues, a researcher named Lou Lasagna, refused to co-author the paper because he had doubts about the data and felt that Beecher might have been a little too enthusiastic in his interpretation of the findings.
So even though Beecher's work was influential, it sparked debate within the medical community.
It did.
Did that debate continue?
It did, and it still continues to this day.
Really?
In the 1990s, a group of German scientists re-examined Beecher's data and found no evidence to support the placebo effect in the studies he had cited. You might be wondering, does this mean the placebo effect is a myth? Not necessarily. What it suggests is that Beecher's initial findings might have been overstated. We're starting to understand that while the placebo effect is real, it's more nuanced than we initially thought.
That made sense. So Beecher might have been a bit ahead of his time, but he opened the door to a whole new way of thinking about health and healing. One of the ideas he proposed was the concept of placebo reactors. The idea that some people are just more susceptible to placebo effects than others. Is there any truth to that?
Well, unfortunately, it's not that simple. Research hasn't been able to pin down exactly who is more or less likely to respond to a placebo. What's even more interesting is that a single person can react differently at different times, depending on a variety of factors. Beecher brilliantly captured this dynamic nature when he said that being a placebo reactor is a state, not a trait.
So it's not about who you are, but rather the circumstances and maybe even your mindset at a specific moment in time.
Yes, it's far more complex and dynamic than we initially thought.
Okay, so we've established that the placebo effect is real. but complex.
Yeah.
What's really fascinating to me is that we're now starting to uncover the science behind it, actually peering into the brain to see what's happening.
It is an exciting area of research.
Yeah?
We're using brain imaging techniques to see how placebo interventions can actually change the way the brain processes information, especially when it comes to pain.
So are you saying that our beliefs and expectations can actually alter the way our brains perceive physical sensations?
That's what the research is suggesting. For example, imagine you have a headache. Your brain is receiving signals from pain receptors in your head. Placebo interventions, like taking a sugar pill that you believe is a painkiller, might actually influence how those pain signals are interpreted in the brain. It's as if the placebo is turning down the volume on the pain experience.
That's incredible. It's almost like our minds have the power to modulate the way our bodies feel. You know, it's amazing to think that Beecher, even back in 1955, had this idea that the placebo effect was related to sensation processing. He was way ahead of his time.
He really was. And now with modern neuroscience, we're starting to understand the mechanisms behind his intuition.
This all raises a big question about the ethics of using placebos in treatment. I mean, if we know that a sugar pill can sometimes have real effects, is it okay to use them, especially if it means deceiving patients?
You've hit on a really important point. By the 1970s, informed consent became a cornerstone of medical ethics, making it unethical to deceive patients by giving them placebos without their knowledge.
So no more sneaking in those sugar pills without the patient knowing. But I've heard about this other concept, open-label placebos, where patients are actually told they're taking a placebo. Is that even a real thing?
It is, and it's one of the most fascinating areas of placebo research today. Studies, including some of my own, have shown that even when people know they're taking a placebo, they can still experience positive effects. It challenges the traditional idea that expectation is the only driver of the placebo effect.
That completely blows my mind. So if it's not just about expecting to feel better, what else could be going on?
That's the big question. It seems there are other factors at play.
So it seems like we're just scratching the surface of this incredibly complex phenomenon.
Yeah.
What are some of the other factors that might be contributing to the placebo effect, even when people know they're taking a placebo?
There are a few intriguing possibilities. Some researchers believe the ritual of taking a pill, even if it's a placebo, can trigger a conditioned response in the body. Think of it like Pavlov's dogs. They learn to associate the sound of a bell with food, and eventually just the bell alone could trigger salivation. Similarly, the act of taking a pill might activate certain physiological pathways associated with healing, regardless of the pill's actual contents.
So even if we know it's a placebo, the act of taking it might still send a signal to our bodies to start the healing process.
Exactly.
That's fascinating.
Another factor could be the patient-doctor relationship.
Okay.
When a doctor expresses care and confidence in a treatment, even a placebo, it can instill a sense of hope and optimism in the patient, which might contribute to a positive outcome.
So the power of suggestion, the feeling of being cared for, the belief in the treatment, all of these things might be intertwined with the placebo effect.
Absolutely. And don't forget the power of our own internal narratives. The stories we tell ourselves about our health and our ability to heal can have a profound impact on our physical well-being. If we believe that we're capable of getting better, we might be more likely to experience positive changes, even if those changes are partially driven by the placebo effect.
It's amazing to think that our minds might hold more power over our bodies than we realize.
It really is, and that's what makes this field so captivating. It challenges us to think differently about the mind-body connection, about what it means to heal, and about the very nature of reality itself.
So where do we go from here? What are some of the big unanswered questions about the placebo effect?
One of the biggest mysteries is how placebos actually work on a neurological level. We've seen changes in brain activity during placebo responses, but we still don't fully understand the specific pathways and mechanisms involved. Another key question is how to harness the power of the placebo effect ethically and effectively in clinical settings. Can we use our understanding of the placebo effect to enhance the effectiveness of real treatments?
That's a really intriguing question.
Yeah.
If we could figure out how to integrate the placebo effect into conventional medicine, it could revolutionize the way we approach healthcare.
It certainly could. And it's important to remember that while Beecher's work might have been controversial, it paved the way for decades of research that has deepened our understanding of the mind-body connection and the incredible potential of the human brain.
So for our listener out there, if you're curious about the placebo effect, I encourage you to keep exploring.
Yeah.
It's a fascinating field full of mysteries and possibilities.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much for taking us on this deep dive into the placebo effect. It's been an incredibly thought-provoking conversation.
Thanks for having me.
And to our listeners, thanks for joining us. We'll catch you next time for another fascinating exploration.